Did you get a haircut?
No, I just have a hat on. My hair
Okay.
still.
Okay, I was gonna be kind of disappointed, you know.
Yeah, I know. I've talked to a lot of people about it actually. The funniest people to tell me not to cut my hair, the funniest person to tell me not to cut my hair is probably Casey Cunningham. He's like, don't do it.
Did he tell you why?
No, but he was basically, I assume it had to do with the fact that he doesn't have hair and wishes he did.
That was my assumption too. I was like, most of the
Yeah,
time, people who don't have hair, will tell you to
yeah.
keep it.
So I was like, you know what? Just because it was you that told me, I'm not cutting it.
How about somebody who has told you to cut it?
Roger Chandler, Michigan State. He basically every time he sees me tells me to get a cut.
Yeah,
But
well, do you ever just get it trimmed to be like, dude, I just got it cut. Like, I just got a haircut.
yeah, I have done that a few times. Yeah, I'm like it was cut. It was longer. Actually, so at Big Ten's, he was saying I should cut it, and I was like, it's shorter than it was when I was there, so like it is shorter. Like I did cut it. But
When did you decide to start growing it out? Because like when you were wrestling, it was a little shorter, right?
yeah, I always had uh, basically like some variation of a buzz cut with a fade or something when I was competing. It was when I was at Buffalo. It was around COVID when all that kind of hit and the barber shops all shut down. It was a combination of that and then like Stutz was not a huge fan of long hair for guys on the team, so I was like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna grow my hair out, see if he says anything to me."
And what was the verdict? Did he say anything?
No, he didn't. So it went well. And then I was like, you know what? I have grown too attached to it now, and I can't get rid of it. So
Had you ever had long hair before?
no, that like the longest I ever had it was probably like face level, eye level, probably. And back when like the Justin Bieber haircut was a thing.
Yeah, yeah.
um,
So like probably
but
what back in
yeah,
back in like high school and stuff.
yeah, early high school. And then I remember at one point my high school coach took me to a to a barber shop when I had my hair that long and was basically like, "You're getting your hair cut." And
No
he
way.
ironically, yeah, he had me get the same haircut as him, ironically, which was it was just funny. Uh, but yeah,
Wow.
good times.
Yeah, I was gonna say, geez, that's all right. Well, because nowadays, at least in the high school level, when I think when we were growing up, you kind of had to have it a certain length. Like you couldn't have
Yeah,
long hair like we have. You had to have it
yeah,
below above your ears or whatever, and above your
yeah,
forehead. I don't know, whatever it was.
yeah.
Oh gosh.
They finally loosened up on those when people started chopping off braids and stuff. And they're like, okay, maybe this is a bad look for the sport. Which
Yeah.
probably a good call.
Yeah, I actually there was one time I was wrestling in Cedar Falls, Iowa for I don't know, some national tournament or something. And I was overweight by like a tenth or two. And I'm like, I am
Yeah.
not running, I'm not running. No. And so I ended up cutting my hair and I made
Yeah,
weight. So
yeah,
that was
yeah,
about as drastic as I ever got with it.
yeah. It I don't know. Uh, Luckily, never had to worry about that because I didn't have long hair when I was cutting weight or anything. But
Yeah.
I don't know. It gets to a certain point sometimes where like I either have to just start wearing a hair tie when I wrestle, or it gets really annoying. And I try to keep it like right at that borderline of like pre-hair tie where it's not too annoying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But there's some days where you're like, I'm gonna lose my mind if one more person lands on my hair when I'm trying to move.
Yes, yes. Or, and when it's the little things like you're bending over to pick something up and it just falls in your face and everything, and you just gotta.
Mm,
So
yeah,
yeah, I understand.
yeah.
Um,
Uh,
well,
it's
now that
it's
we
more
talked
fun though.
about what's that?
It's more fun though. I enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah. What does Storniolo think of the hair?
He's he's a fan of it. I mean, he's got his nice little mullet himself. So I last year I was joking around with him and BJ. I was like, BJ, we need you to get like an afro or something, because then we would have the most diverse hair in coaching by a landslide.
Yeah.
I was like, I'll even get you like a wig afro to wear for a duel, like if I have to. Like we can make that happen.
And what did he say? Was he going for it or no?
He's definitely not going to grow out an afro. I think I'm going to have to just like one of these days pull the trigger on it and just buy one for him. See if I can convince him to wear it. But yeah, I think that'd be a hell of a trio with the mullet and afro and just long red locks. That's hard to beat.
Hard. Yeah, you can't beat it. I mean, I'm even going through coaching staffs now. I'm like, geez, half of them have little hair in general, you know?
Yeah, and Central Michigan's damn near whole coaching staff is all like bald.
Right? Yeah, I was thinking the same thing about Penn State. I'm like, geez, all those guys are bald.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
true. Casey is from Central Michigan, so I don't know where that ties in there. I am too, I guess. So it's inevitable, maybe. I don't
yeah.
know.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. We talked about the most important thing in life, and that's hair. So everything else will be just
Yep.
icing on the cake from here on out.
Yeah, easy.
So yeah, we're in the off season. I wanted to ask you this, off season's upon us. What was the first thing that you did when the season got over for you while you were competing? What was the first thing you did? Or one of the first
Uh,
things?
typically it'd be just eating whatever I wanted, whether that was like pizza or ice cream, just like getting the food desires out of the way. I feel like that's a pretty big one, especially after the year of like maintaining your weight at a pretty lower level, especially during my time at Central. We would wrestle like 40 matches a year, so it was like every weekend you were weighing in. There was never like
Hmm.
that time to really indulge. So a little bit of that, and then honestly just like getting away from the mat as much as possible for like a week, where you're like able to kind of get that reset and different perspective. I honestly, in hindsight, wish I would have done a little bit more of that and like taken maybe like 2 or 3 weeks off later in my career to really like let my body recover and kind of let my mental state like
Hmm.
fully reset, where it was gonna put me in a better headspace going into the off season training. But you live and you learn.
Hmm. Yeah. What did you do? Like you talked about, okay, you ate some stuff. Mentally, what did you do to take a step away? Were you like a video game guy or read books or hunt,
A little bit of video games. My now wife and I, girlfriend at the time, we would like go find somewhere to go, whether it was like some downtown city. I like photography a little bit, so had a camera. We just kind of go take pictures, do stuff like that. Basically, something to shift where my head's focused on. So having other hobbies is good to be able to like take everything away from wrestling and not really have that as a thought in your head for a little bit, and that
Yeah.
way it's a little easier to get back into it.
Yeah. Anything specific that you like to like take pictures of? I mean, was it like action shots or was it nature? I'm just curious what kind of photography you were
Uh,
into.
a little bit of everything. I do like nature shots. I just got a Fujifilm camera not too long ago and was
Okay.
I guess last summer, yeah, was taking some pictures of flowers and stuff on campus. There's always just cool like scenery that there's some pretty good pictures of, and then obviously with like social media and everything, try to get some cool pictures of like my wife and everything if I can for social media or just for like personal storage where she can like
Hmm.
have memories to look back on.
Yeah, for sure.
But
Yeah. You said that you guys wrestled like 40 matches at Central Michigan. Why, what was the thought behind that? Like, did you ever ask, you know, coach what?
uh,
I mean, that's a lot. It seems like a lot compared to what they do now, I guess I should say.
Yeah, it's definitely drastically different. It's dang near double the match count
Yeah.
that some dudes end up with. But I think the thought process behind it, I didn't ever like fully have a conversation with Brelly about it at the time, but looking at it now from my perspective, I think a little bit of it was just getting as much quality competition as we could to try to make sure that barring we needed an at-large bid or like whatever, we had as many opportunities as possible to put ourselves in a position to qualify for NCAA's. And just like I don't know, it there was a little bit just trying to go compete at everything. We would back when they had the Eastern Michigan Open, we would wrestle Eastern Michigan Open, Michigan State Open, and then hit like 2 or 3 tournaments throughout the year. So it was a lot of tournaments where unless you're going 0-2, you're probably getting a good bit of matches in. So
Hmm.
that added a good bit to the matches. My first few years, I think we did Eastern Michigan, Michigan State. We did the Scuffle. We did. I think there was one other tournament in there too. We did Reno my first or second year. So there was like 4 tournaments in there. That was
Jeez.
uh, realistically, say you get 4 matches at each tournament. That's already 16 matches.
Yeah. Wow.
So it was.
You know, what you said, I never thought about that. And about when you said getting quality matches, just in
Mm-hmm.
case you do need an at-large bid. Um,
No.
that's an interesting take there. Like if you're at a school like Central Michigan, the conference duels, you don't have as many opportunities as the
Mm-hmm.
other, like the Big Ten, the ACC, to get those high-ranking quality wins per se. So
Yep.
to wrestle as many matches as you can like that, just in case something happens where you get upset or something at the conference tournament and you need that large bid, you have that resume to compare with somebody else at a, Big Ten school that, hmm, it's a good point. I never thought about that like that.
Yeah, and like I never would have thought about it like that too until I got into coaching. Now, like there's levels of me that understands differently now, and like I don't know, I always find myself to be somewhere in the middle with with everything that I've seen so far or like been through as far as like my athletic career, where it's like I can understand where that logic comes from. I also
Yep.
typically always feel like there's somewhere a little bit lesser that's probably going to be a happy medium where like
Yeah.
not wrestling 40 matches and having my body a little beat up come March and uh, feeling feeling not as great as I could, but I do think it was a strategic planning, and I think obviously Borelli was an awesome coach. He's been around forever, so I think a lot of that for him, I'm sure, was trial and error and just kind of figuring out what worked in his earlier coaching days, and that seemed to be a good strategy. And at the time too, I think the MAC was a little tougher than it is now with like schools like Missouri and Old Dominion and Northern Iowa in there. I remember my redshirt freshman year when I got on the podium. The top 3 finishers at the MAC tournament finished, I think, fourth, fifth, and seventh at NCAA's that year. Where like this year, I want to say there was one All American in the MAC. Where that year we had 3 in the same weight. So
Wow. Yeah. Sammy Alvarez was the All-American, right?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I know he
Yeah.
did. Yeah, I'm not entirely positive if there was others, but I know he for sure did.
Yeah.
So,
Wow. Yeah, and the one year you guys got second,
yeah.
you know? I mean, that had to be a pretty awesome achievement. Like you said, the MAC, I mean, it still is a tough conference, but there are, like you just listed a couple teams that are not in there anymore that
Yeah.
made it even a little tougher. And
Yeah.
yeah, you guys came away with second place. That was,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, it was we had some pretty solid teams. My like most vivid memory at wrestling at Central wasn't even wrestling at Central, but it was wrestling in West Gym against Northern Iowa, and just crazy environment as a whole. Obviously, West Gyms was an incredible place to wrestle. But I think we drew the weight and I ended up being the first match. So like I got to go out there and then just chill and watch the rest of the duel. It was cool. Um, and it came down to 41. We had Zach Ryan at 41 at the time, and I think we were pretty much going to win the duel unless something crazy happened. And he ended up beating his kid, and he sealed the duel, and he kind of like partied a little bit on him, and I remember fans were not too fond of it, but we ended up getting like a police escort to our locker room and then out to our bus afterward. It was just like, wow, these guys live, breathe, and die wrestling.
Yeah.
So it was a really cool experience, though.
What was it like being the first match? Like normally you're, kind of in the middle, so you have some time to kind of warm up and get loose a little bit, but being the first one out of the chute, was that like a curveball to you, or were you just like, fuck it, I'll wrestle whenever?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a curveball, but also a little bit of fuck it, we'll ride. I didn't really cut a ton of weight, so this was when it was still 1 hour weigh-ins, so it was a pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of an adjustment, but I think the most curveball piece of it was just like trying to reconfigure the routine and being like, okay, so
Yeah, there you
I
go.
usually do this at this time. Like, how am I going to go about shifting my routine so that way it lines up with being the first match opposed to being the fourth match? But um, at the end of the day, like I'm going to be ready to rock regardless at any point. And that was definitely something that had been kind of instilled in me at a young age, and especially throughout high school, where it's like I don't care if you're sick or whatever you got going on. Like wrestling is where you're gonna find your peace. You're gonna go out there and you're gonna do it regardless. So I think it was just kind of par for the course. It's like, all right, well, we're
Yeah.
first. Let's go start us off on the right foot.
Yeah. Did you have some moments like throughout your career earlier, like you just kind of mentioned or alluded to, that you had to deal with that made you ready for a moment like that? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So the biggest one that comes to mind, my junior year of high school, it was like the week before our first duel. I was rolling around with Lincoln Olson, who ended up going to Oklahoma State, coming to Central Michigan for a little bit. I think he's coaching, got a got a head coach club job recently, but I was rolling with him. It was not his fault at all, but I had a leg in. He hit like a quad pod roll, and I tore my meniscus, which it was probably torn before. It had been clicking and everything, but it caught in the joint, so I couldn't move my knee at all, and that was a little panic inducing. Our trainer ended up being able to get it uncaught in the joint so I could like freely move my knee again. And then I went home and I was like sitting on the couch and I went to swing my leg over the armrest and it locked out again. I was like, what is happening?
Hmm.
Um, so I ended up going to the ER that night. They were like, yeah, you have a torn meniscus. So I want to say like a week or so later, got in for surgery. I was too young for them to cut it out because they said I was still growing, so they repaired it. Which meniscus repair is like a 6 month recovery process. Uh, the season at the time would have been November, so like 6 months would have put me back in like what April, May, something like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
And like I don't know, in my mind that was not an option. I was gonna figure out how to be back in time for season. So I think ended up taking me about 3 months to get back on the mat and wrestling, and I ended up wrestling in our like districts and regionals, and couldn't didn't have full range of motion in my knee still. Like I couldn't get my foot to touch my butt, which in
Hmm.
hindsight might have been smart to take a little bit more time and like fully recover, but um, yeah, but pushing through that, and then like I knew I couldn't really cut weight to the same extent, but also like I don't know, the tougher weight class was the weight up anyway, and I was like, I'm not gonna like cut weight to run from competition. I'm gonna like go wrestle. And it was Ken Bade at the time who was at DCC. He ended up going to Penn. I don't know how his college career really panned out, but really good in high school. Had beaten me the year before at a tournament, and I was like, I'm gonna go try to wrestle that weight and see how it goes. Mind you, I'm still coming off of a knee surgery that went a lot quicker than the recovery time should have been, and
Mm-hmm.
just kind of let it rip and ended up losing to him in the semis. Came back, took third, but it was just like if I can deal with that and come back way faster than I should have and still go out there and compete and take a loss that I didn't want to take and still come back and battle back for third, like I'm gonna be able to figure it out regardless, no matter what wrestling throws at me. Like I'm gonna be all right.
Yeah. Dang. And that was your junior year?
Yeah. So my high school career was backwards for most. I won it. I went undefeated my freshman year, went like 54-0. Sophomore year had I think 2 losses, one state tournament. Junior year took third, and then my senior year I lost in the finals in double overtime to Miles and Mean after having beat him. I want to say like 3 times throughout the year before it. So very front loaded. Had a lot of fun those
Mm-hmm.
first 2 years. The back 2 years were a little sad, which actually funny story that I tell a lot of people when it comes to losing in the state finals my senior year. So my high school coach Roy Hall is incredible. He's coached a lot of great wrestlers like Metcalf and Reeder and Donahoe and those guys. So he did an incredible job. Still does an incredible job. But he I walk off the mat after losing in overtime, and like I'm walking into this tunnel. I have my headgear in my hand, and I like spike the shit out of it against this wall, and I
Yeah.
just kind of walk away from it. I'm like, fuck it, I'm leaving it.
Mm-hmm.
Go find a corner to sit in, and just kind of like process everything. And like a minute or two later, he walks over, headgear in hand, looks at me, he goes, "Can I keep this?" Like, yeah, you can keep my headgear, dude. And then the second thing he says to me, he says, I want to tell you this isn't going to, but it's going to haunt you for the rest of your life. I was like, awesome. Awesome.
Wow. What?
So, yeah,
Do you know where that headgear is at now? Does he still
I
have it?
have no idea.
Okay.
I'm sure he does somewhere. I'm sure he doesn't know where it is, but I would imagine he has it somewhere.
Wow. I
But
mean,
yeah.
does that still haunt you to this day, or?
Uh, Not not quite as bad. There's still moments where like it'll creep into my head and I'll be like, fuck.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of other moments now that stepped in front of that one. So it's a little less frequent, but it's still there. I'll still have some nightmares about it every blue moon.
Yeah. Did that hamper or hinder like the recruiting process, having been a two-time state champ as a freshman and sophomore, and then not getting it done in the latter part of your career in high school?
To a certain degree, I think yes. So like I still got recruited by a good bit of schools, but as far as like the scholarship offers and everything like that, it wasn't quite as crazy. And so my junior year going into my senior year, I took fourth at Super 32, which like I don't know, I thought was solid, like
Yeah.
all things considered. um,
Yeah, because were
and
you still
like
recovering from surgery at that point still too?
technically, yeah, it was like that was probably like the 7-8 month mark. So it was like
Yeah.
realistically probably should have been, but was given my timeline, feeling a lot better at that time than I did
Yeah.
come state tournament. But yeah, I took I want to say third at Flow Nationals one of the earlier years, and then ended up taking fourth at Super 32 that summer. So I kind of had the anticipation that there was going to be a little bit more interest than there was, all things
Hmm.
considered. And like I got a good bit of looks coming out of high school, but it was more schools trying to give me like smaller offers, whether it was like anywhere between 10 to 30%, where like depending on the school, it wasn't necessarily a bad offer, but like I don't know, I valued myself a little bit more. I ended up going to Central Michigan on 50%, which Central's pretty cheap to go to school there, and then 50% covered a good bit of it. So
Mhm.
yeah, it hindered it a little bit, but at the end of the day, I think like in hindsight, I think staying a little bit closer to home and being able to have my support system close by was important for me in those early years. I don't necessarily know. Hard to say how my career would have transpired if I went a little bit further away. But
Mhm.
I do think that it was a good thing for me to have all that nearby and be able to like really grow and develop those first couple of years there.
Yeah. Did you feel like you were regressing because you didn't get it done as a junior and senior, but you did as a freshman and sophomore? And maybe regressing is not the right word, but I mean, the expectations only go through the roof after the first 2 years. You're like, all right, I'm a two-time state champ. I got to at least get one more, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And like I don't know, it's the coming from Davison, the bar was always just really high with like again Metcalf and Reeder and Donahoe, where it's just like
Yeah.
Metcalf being a four timer, handful of four timers from Davison, where it was like initially the goal goes from being a four timer, and then you lose junior year, you're like, all right, well, like I tore my meniscus, I rushed back, like it is what it is,
Yeah.
couldn't win it, still healthy, feel like I could have. Coming senior year, like I had a really good senior year. Want to say I might have been undefeated up until the point of the state finals. I'm pretty sure. And we wrestled a tough schedule. I think I wrestled Isaiah White from Illinois. What school was it? Oak Park River Forest. At the time, Oak Park was they beat the
Solid.
shit out of us in that duel. Yeah, they beat us bad. I want to say we won maybe like one or two matches in that duel. But I beat him in that duel, and then I think we wrestled Montini Catholic, who was also solid at the time.
Yes.
Beat a pretty good dude from their school, and like had a lot of good wins throughout the year. And then so my in the regional finals, or no, I think it was the first round of regionals, first match of regionals. So like not even really wrestling anybody that was super good. I like got in on a double and I went to like finish it, and when you're wrestling somebody that like doesn't react the way that you're expecting it to, and everything just kind of like goes awkwardly.
Yep.
So I'm going to finish this double leg, and his body like just isn't where I think it is. So I just drive myself straight on top of my shoulder and sprained my AC joint pretty good in my shoulder. And like couldn't quite do as much as I wanted to with it throughout the next couple weeks, which was unfortunate. But come the state tournament, like everything was kind of feeling fine. I was taking more Tylenol than I probably should, and now looking back, Tylenol is not even what you're supposed to be taking for anything that's like below the head. So I don't know why. That was a Paul Donahoe special. He was like, "Here, take 1,000 milligrams of Tylenol. You won't feel it." Like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like in the finals match, I got the first takedown. Ended up giving up a takedown late on the edge, and then it went to ride outs. But I don't necessarily think there was ever like a thought of regressing. It was just more of like, fuck, that sucks. I wish I could have got it done. And like, I don't know. I think a lot of that kind of helped drive me and made me feel like I had more to prove going into college, and like felt like there was still more in the tank. So as much as it sucked at the time, like I do think it helped me moving forward and kind of put me in that space I needed to be in to get on the podium my redshirt freshman year. But,
Yeah. Um, yeah. Before we get to a little bit of the Central Michigan time, are you from Davison, Michigan, like born and raised type of deal?
semi, semi.
Okay.
So I started off at Goodrich. They were not too happy with me when I transferred to Davison, all things considered, because Paul Donahoe, Brent Metcalf, Chase Metcalf Hall. Went to Goodrich originally and then transferred to Davison. They were a little bit more original with Roy Hall going over there. So he was one of the assistants at Goodrich at the time and was basically like, if you guys can get my wife a teaching job at Goodrich, then I will stay. And they couldn't, but Davison could. So he ended up going over to Davison, took those guys with him. So it brings a big what if. What if they would have got his wife's teaching job?
Yeah,
Things would
right.
have been a lot different. But yeah, so I started off at Goodrich for up until 8th grade. But I wouldn't necessarily say like wrestling. I trained in like the Goodrich Youth Club. After that, Mark Hall and I lived like 10 minutes away from each other. So he kind of brought me in and we would do a lot of like private workouts. So my first like real coach as far as like a one-on-one level was Brent Metcalf's brother Chase Metcalf, who died in a car accident when I was in like 4th grade, which sucked. But he definitely left a big impact as far as the wrestling piece goes. Like he was an awesome coach, just awesome to be around. But yeah, so he was our first coach ever that like really individualized. It was like just Mark, me, and him doing these
Mm-hmm.
practices. So pretty focused, and there wasn't really a whole lot of like going to Goodrich or doing anything like that. So it was training there, and then after that all happened, I think John Reeder ended up being the next guy that coached us individually, and that was a lot more Davison focused. We would do a lot of our workouts in the Davison room, and Mark had a room in his garage that we would work out in a lot. So after that, we kind of started our own youth club, called it the Chase Metcalf Studs in honor of Chase, and
Chase
had our own
Metcalf
little custom
studs.
singlets. Yep, that was CMS, which we had like maybe 8 dudes, but if you saw us pulling up to a tournament, especially in Michigan, like we were gonna run it, and and probably win the tournament even with teams with like 20 kids. We'd
Mm-hmm.
win it with like 8 because we'd all win.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so we started that, and that kind of was the beginning of a lot more just travel wrestling. I think we wrestled in PA more than we did in Michigan for a while there. Where like
Really?
I have, yeah, I have a lot of memories wrestling like Nolf, Vincenzo, who else? Michael Kemmer, um, Josh Shields, like all of those guys. We would wrestle on a consistent basis, just going out to those tournaments. So kind of took away from the Goodrich piece was definitely, I wouldn't even necessarily say affiliated fully with like a school at the time. I was still going to school at Goodrich, but like the wrestling wise, I wasn't like a part of the Goodrich wrestling program. Just with where we were kind of at and with what Mark wanted to do, we were in a motorhome dang near every weekend, traveling the country, going to Tulsa, and on our way back hitting some random podunk tournament in like Bowling Green, Ohio. It was just like going to multiple tournaments a weekend. On top of that, double entering in age groups at multiple tournaments in a weekend, where it was just
Gosh.
it was a lot of wrestling. Yeah, it was an eventful childhood in a different capacity than most people would have an eventful childhood. But
Yeah, I'd say.
a lot of good memories, a lot of fun times.
Yeah.
So it was cool. But yeah, not entirely fully Davison raised, but in a different capacity than going to school at Davison. I would say my wrestling career was definitely more Davison influenced than Goodrich influenced.
Yeah. Did I hear about there was a motorhome involved in all this?
Yeah. So that part was the most ideal because we had a TV in the motorhome and we would bring like a GameCube or an Xbox and we would just play video games and DSs came out at the time, so we played a lot of Mario Kart. We played a lot of Halo, a lot
Yeah.
of Madden, a lot of NCAA, all those games on the road trips because they were some long road trips, but it was typically in motorhomes there's like in the back of the motorhome there's like a bed that's kind of like the main bedroom, whatever.
Yeah.
Mark converted it so like usually there's like a walkway on both sides of the bed where like obviously you go and you have your like closet and everything. He basically converted it so he covered that all up, and the whole back of the motorhome was just one big bed for all of us to sleep on the road, uh, which was pretty funny. So there'd be like 4 or 5 of the kids sleeping in this big bed in the back of the motorhome, and the parents would be driving, or like the beds in the front of the motorhome, they'd be sleeping up there. So yeah, it was looking back a hell of a setup, and we would pull up to tournaments, and like if they were at a high school, we'd pull up and plug in to the high school that we were wrestling at. Um, so it was entertaining. There was a lot of good stories. My dad was actually just talking about we were pulling up late to one tournament, and Mark's just like flying through this school parking lot and didn't realize there was a speed bump, and just my dad's standing by the shower at this time, and Mark just flies into the speed bump, and my dad like hits the shower, and it just shatters everywhere. So yeah, it a lot of just random fun little memories like that where like doesn't even have anything to do with the wrestling, but still just good times.
Yeah. Those are the best kind of memories, the ones that really stick with you. you know Obviously some of the competing part sticks with you, but those stories are the ones that really, like, the first ones that come to mind, like, gosh, remember this road trip we went on, and like everyone just like has a hoot and holler. Like, same with us. Team camps was our thing, like we have so many
Yeah,
just ridiculous stories from team camps we went to that just come to mind before, maybe a win or a loss or actually competing. So,
yeah,
who was in that little group that you would go with? So there was you, and then who were some other kids?
so yeah, it was me and Mark. In the earlier days, it was like Danny Garr, who was part of Goodrich, but so him, because originally the club was like the first 3 of us were Hall, Oliver, Gar, so it was Team Hog at the very beginning. The that was the
Perfect.
OG team.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, but that was kind of the very start of it, and it kind of turned into me, Mark, Lincoln, Olson. Were a good part of it. Nathan Ellis, who ended up wrestling at Michigan State a little bit. Trying to think who else. We would have a lot of people just kind of pop into, where it was like
Mhm.
Ben Whitford would occasionally come travel with us on some of those trips. A lot
Really?
of the St. John's guys, yeah. So like the Massos would come occasionally. I remember one of the road trips. Mark was pretty strict on the road with like other parents and with what time we would go to bed. But there was I can't remember the kid's name or the kid's dad's name, but we were at, I want to say we were in Oklahoma at Tulsa, and this kid's dad like came into the motorhome after having some adult beverages a little earlier in the morning than he should have, and Mark was not too fond of that, so he kicked him out of the motorhome and made him find his own way back from Tulsa, Oklahoma, back to Michigan because of
No.
it.
Whoa.
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
yeah,
Wow.
but it was I mean the core group was always really like me and Mark, and then occasionally it turned in a little bit to Lincoln Olson, and then it was just kind of wherever we were at the time. So like we ended up bringing in a good bit of Davison kids for a while there with like Matt Miller and Jacob Madrigal and some of those guys. Matt Miller ended up wrestling at Indiana Tech. He was a NAIA American, I want to say, his like freshman or sophomore year. So we had a lot of good dudes around us. They like looking back, the coaches that he brought in for us was actually insane. I'm like, I don't even understand how. Like we we would have like Mike Klazicki coming in when he was coaching at Michigan at the time. We'd have John Fisher coming in to coach us. We'd
Oh
have
my gosh.
Kellen Russell came in to run some practices. Where I'm like, we just constantly had a revolving door of like college coaches and national champs and All Americans just coming to like coach us as like 10 to 12-year-olds. Like looking at it now, trying to think of consistently going and running 12-year-olds through practice. I'm like, I don't know if I could do that.
Right?
Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah. So it I mean, wrestling wise, incredibly helpful. Like gives you a whole lot of different techniques. Coaching wise, I think it helped me more in hindsight now, where it's like I had a lot of different viewpoints on wrestling, a lot of different technique points on wrestling, where it's like there's a million different ways to do everything. It doesn't necessarily matter how you do it, as long as it works and you
Yeah.
you can figure it out and justify it, then it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
So it was
Dang.
a lot of crazy good coaches for
Yeah,
sure.
right. And the funny part is like in the moment did you know who some of these guys were like when you were that young, or did it only dawn on you until you got a little older and
I like knew, but I didn't really know the extent of it. Where it's like, yeah, I know you did good, but I don't have a measuring stick to like quantify how good that is. And
yeah.
obviously now looking back, I'm like, holy shit. But yeah, it was probably like 2 or 3 years ago where it really like I processed it all. I was like, that's wild that we were able to like get all these dudes to come out and like I don't know, we had Chris Williams coming out on a regular basis. We had like just people coming out on a consistent basis too, where it wasn't just like you're coming once and that's it and never
Mhm.
coming back. It was like on a weekly basis. We would have like a weekly John Fisher practice. It was like,
Wow.
oh, like I want to ask how much he was paying these people to come in to coach us weekly, because it had to have been pretty good, all things considered.
Yeah,
But
I'd say. Um, and they weren't living in that area at the time, right? I mean, like
no,
Russell, for
it was at least
instance,
like
you know?
it was at least like an hour, 2 hour drive for them.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, which yeah, wild, wild.
Yeah. What would it take for you? Like, now you're kind of in that position. If someone like called you up and was like, "Hey, yo, Justin, will you come to my practice, once a week?" What would it take?
I think it would have to take the right kid parent combination that like I don't know. For me, a lot of it's just uh, base a lot of stuff off the vibes and just
Mhm.
like if I feel like you truly are like passionate about the sport and it's not your parent just like trying to live vicariously through you and like they're
Mhm.
pushing you to do it yourself. I don't think it would necessarily take as much. I would definitely need it to be a little closer in proximity. I think I might make them come to me or like meet in
Mhm.
the middle somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think given the right kid again, if I feel they're truly passionate about it and want to get better, I don't think it would take a whole lot, which is just the weird part, especially with us when we were that young. We were like almost too young where you don't even know if they like really
Yeah.
like wrestling or if it's going to pan out or not. But yeah, so that was an interesting one to me to
Yeah.
think back on.
Yeah. Well, they're yeah. You know what? I bet they would say the same thing. Like, it didn't
Yeah.
take as much as you thought because there was this Oliver kid in there, and we just, we could tell he liked it, and there you go. So,
Yeah. Yeah, there's always a few of those kids. You just gotta find them.
yeah. When did you start wrestling?
It started when I was 6 years old. My mom worked at a restaurant. It was John's Pizzeria and Steakhouse, and I remember we got a call one night from her boss, and he was like, "Wrestling season just started. Would Justin be interested in joining the wrestling team?" And 6-year-old me was like, "WWE, fuck yeah, sign me up."
Yeah.
Uh, showed up to the first practice, and it was not WWE. It was wrestling, and I don't remember entirely, but my dad specifically has told me the first practice I basically cried the entire time. And at some point after the practice, he asked me if I wanted to keep wrestling. And for whatever reason, in that moment, I was like, yeah, I do. Um, and yeah, so that year went on, and there was the end of the year banquet. This part made me upset. Uh, they gave out an award for people that had perfect attendance, right? And so from that day forward, I didn't miss a single practice, but I didn't get the award for coming to every practice. And I was like, what? And it was because they didn't ask me until after the first practice if I
Yeah.
wanted to be on the wrestling team. So I missed the very first practice because I didn't even know it was a thing.
Yeah.
I was like,
Jeez.
you would think they would have accounted for that and been like, okay, he showed up to everything else. We should probably
Yeah.
just give him the award anyway. But no, I didn't apparently earn it. So
Dang. Did you dirty.
tough. Yeah, I'd probably have it hanging in my room here somewhere.
Right.
But
No kidding.
no.
It'd be right behind you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then fast forward, when did college wrestling become part of the picture? Or when did you start thinking about like, all right, I'm going to do this, I think, at the next level?
Yeah. So I think honestly, sometime during slash after my freshman year of high school
Yeah.
was the first time that it really was like a full thought. And like I don't know, having gone undefeated as a freshman, beating some solid kids. I think that was when it kind of came into the picture of like that is a reality that like I can go to college for wrestling for sure. And up until that point, I was still playing football, baseball, played
Really?
soccer up until like eighth grade. Yeah, so my freshman and sophomore year, my freshman year I still played football, baseball, and I wrestled. My sophomore year I played football and wrestled, didn't play baseball anymore. And then after my sophomore year, I was like, I don't need to be playing football right now. I'm too small for this, and I don't want to hurt myself playing
Hmm.
football and fuck up my chances of going to college to wrestle. So
Yeah.
um, after the sophomore year, I think that was when it kind of really turned into more of like a full focus. I was always like wrestling year round. There was like from whatever age when I was playing like four sports, I would go from like whatever practice was first. So after school was probably football practice to wrestling practice, and then from wrestling practice to like soccer practice or whatever order it was, where it was like three sports practices in a day.
Jeez.
And like holy shit! Looking back at it, my parents literally had no time to themselves. They were just driving me everywhere.
Yeah. Were you
um,
like decent at all the sports? Sounds like maybe were you like athletic at enough to perform, I guess.
Yeah, I was definitely yeah, I was better at soccer than baseball for sure.
Hmm.
I was good at football until I ended up being too small. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
I we we had a pretty crazy all-star team at one point. I want to say in like middle school where it was a team full of wrestlers in like the Davison Barry Stokes football league, and we just beat the shit out of everybody. Like, I want to
Yeah.
say we gave up like three touchdowns the whole year and just like dominated. So yeah, I was solid at most sports. Wrestling, I think, was one of the better sports for me. Just with like football practices drove me insane with the amount of like standing around there was. Like it wasn't. I
Hmm.
needed something that was like constantly engaging. Soccer, it was like a lot of aimless running around. It's like this
Hmm.
feels pointless. And then baseball is obviously boring in its own regard to
Yep.
a certain capacity. So the constant immersion of wrestling is what really got me. And I think that's a little bit of just the ADHD brain, where it's like I needed to constantly be like doing something. So
Yeah. Um, did you have success or like when did you start having success in wrestling? Were you good right away? Did it take a little bit to get going? What was that progression like?
I think there was a little bit of just like right away success to an extent. So there was obviously like the first year wrestling tournaments that like it was all first year kids. So the first tournament I went to was one of those tournaments, and I went and I won my first tournament. But obviously against a bunch of kids that were also wrestling in their first tournaments. So
Yeah.
um, after that, kind of started going to a little bit more of just like the age group tournaments where it was everybody, and had a decent amount of success. Ended up not. I was like one match away from qualifying for the state tournament my first year wrestling. Um, Crazily enough, I still remember who the match was against and exactly how I ended up losing the match, which is a little fucked up. That is somehow still seared into my head. But wrestling Cody Hall from Cairo, and we had there was this girl that was reffing, and I want to say I was up by a point, and he like had hit a stand up, and I like dropped down on his ankle, and like was on his ankle as time expired, but the ref gave him a point, and it ended up going to overtime, and ended up losing in overtime, and he ended up going to the state tournament, and I didn't. I don't know why I still remember that, but I do. So that that was my first year of wrestling,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was around a little bit after that time where I started wrestling with Mark Hall, and um, everything kind of escalated at a pretty quick rate. We started going to like out of state tournaments, went to some tournament in Ohio, and like had won it the first out of state tournament. And then we started going to national tournaments. First national tournament I went to, I ended up winning it.
Wow.
But it was always like, so I always felt good, but not too good because I would win these tournaments and he would enter in two age groups and win both. I was like, I'm doing good, but like in comparison, I suck. um, and then there was a certain point where I started entering the two age groups, and I would like win my age group and take like second, third, whatever in the age group above me, and he's always winning both age groups. So I'm still like, I'm doing good, but there's
Mhm.
I could be doing better. So it was like definitely something that like I was relatively good at initially.
Yeah.
I do think also there was just a lot of time and resources being put into making sure that like I figured it out. And like I cared a lot as a kid. I would get so frustrated if I couldn't figure out technique. I would like cry if I couldn't figure out how
Mhm.
to like drill the move that they were teaching. So I did care a lot, and I had a lot of coaches that cared a lot and wanted to see me do well, which was helpful. And then obviously training with somebody like Mark, having his dad there to like make sure we're doing things the right way, and continuing to develop was big. But a little bit of both.
Yeah. Um, how did you land at Central Michigan?
Yeah. So full circle now at this point. So Metzger was one of the assistant coaches at the time, and like
Mhm.
he was the first coach there to really like recruit me, which the ironic side of that is he's now the head coach at Davison in my high school, um, which funny how that all transpires. So if anybody in the Michigan area wants to go get coached by someone that is really good at coaching, they should go to Davison. Give a quick plug to them. But yeah, so he recruited me originally to Central, and the way that it all kind of started was a Fargo camp out there, um, that I was practicing at, and like at that time, I kind of felt like I wanted to stay closer to home, and Michigan wasn't recruiting me, which still a little bitter towards them about all that, but different story.
Mhm. Mhm.
So so I went up to Borelli, and I was like, just wanted to let you know that I'm interested in Central Michigan, and I think my dad ended up talking with Metzger a little bit, and that kind of started the ball rolling of them starting to kind of recruit me, and then it ended up being ironically between NC State and Central Michigan when it came down to like me making my decision, which
Ah,
super ironic, all things considered.
yes.
So Pat Pat recruited me pretty. It was Pat and Frank Beasley coming out of high school. They recruited me really heavily coming out of high school, and like went on my visit out there, loved it. They gave me a pretty similar offer to Central. Um, I want to say like the cost of school would have came out to be the same going either place. So I think it was a little bit more scholarship percentage at NC State, but cost of Central and State was a little bit cheaper. Um, so came down to those two. I really liked Pat and Beasley and everybody there. It like there was just like a weird like I felt like I needed to be closer to home and like just a weird vibe of like this doesn't feel super right now where my dad was really adamant against me going to Central Michigan. He really wanted me to go to NC State and was like kind of pissed off when I was telling him I wanted to go to Central because the coaches at NC State not only recruited me, but they recruited him. And they sold him better
Mhm.
than they sold me, apparently. Um,
Mhm.
so, so yeah, I remember he was not too thrilled with my decision
Mhm.
of going to Central over NC State. But again, like being closer to home, I'd already known guys that were on the team at Central, so there was a little bit of comfort in all that. And then like looking at Central's teams at the time, they like I want to say 2 years prior to me committing there, they had like a top 10 NCAA finish with Ben and who else on the team? Gerard Rice and all those guys on the team. They finished top 10 at NCAA's. So it's like they have proven success. Um, like closer to home, I know people on the team. There's good training partners. Cody LeCount had committed there. It was a pretty solid recruit coming out of high school. We had Brent Fleetwood from Delaware, pretty solid recruit from high school. It was a solid recruiting class, solid team, um, and again had proven results. For whatever reason, my dad was not about it. That he was like, "You really think you should get NC State?" I was like, "I'm not doing it." So so I committed to Central, and yeah, it I think in the grand scheme of things was really good for me the first couple of years. My my redshirt year, um, I had actually beaten our starter at 49 in the wrestle off, who ended up qualifying for NCAA's. I want to say he went like 2-2, maybe lost in round of 16. I beat him in the wrestle off earlier in the year. Had a decent redshirt season. Did well, all things considered. And then coming into my redshirt freshman season, I ended up wrestling him in the Michigan State Open finals and lost to him in ultimate ride out, which like as close as you can possibly lose. And I remember a week or so after, I get a call from Borelli, and he was basically like, "Want you to start focusing on next year. I don't know if you're going to be the guy this year. Like, you should really
Wow.
start focusing on what your plan is going to be next year." And he really wanted me to go down to 41, which our 41 pounder was a senior who was ranked also like top 15 in the country at the time. So like, I'm not going to cut down to 41 to be a backup. I'm going to stay at 49 and try to see what I can do. Come to Reno that year, I was wrestling Gio Martinez, who I ironically ended up beating for the seventh place match when I did get on the podium. But I was wrestling him in Reno, and I took a high crotch. He like sat the corner really cleanly on me, and I like just remember smashing my head into the mat, and then I ended up in a cradle and didn't get pinned, but ended up losing the match pretty handily, and kind of got looked at by our trainer afterwards, and ended up pulling out of the tournament because I had some concussion symptoms. And like I remember just feeling like it was a weird like I'd never pulled out of a tournament before for like anything, so it
Right.
was like just a weird uncomfortability of like, okay, why am I doing this? Like, what am I trying to get out of wrestling right now? And like, there's a lot of self-reflection and like just really trying to find that spark or the fun in wrestling again. And just kind of started like up until this point, I would typically just try to wrestle with like guys that were gonna push me and beat me up. After that point, I started wrestling with guys that I was gonna be able to like score points on and like try to make things a little bit more fun again and like try to develop and not just like wrestle dudes that are gonna beat the shit out of me. um,
Mm-hmm.
come into the Southern Scuffle, our starter Heffernan at the time ended up having an eye infection and couldn't wrestle at the Scuffle. So I ended up being like our team point scorer for the tournament, and I had Anthony Colica second round. And I remember just being like, all right, fuck it. I have nothing to lose. Everybody expects me to lose this match. Like, what's the worst that happens? I go out there and just like lose. Like that's what everybody expects. So there was a little bit of that like freedom in that match of like, okay, like it is what it is. It's gonna be what it's gonna be. I don't need to like stress about the result. I can just go out there and wrestle. And honestly, he was ranked like somewhere between seventh and ninth in the country at the time. And at this point, I'm a backup.
Right.
And I ended up beating him in overtime. I want to say I actually hit him in a low single in overtime, and that was how I scored the takedown, which is ironic considering he was at Oklahoma State. But so beat him, and then I go in the next round, lose to Matt Smedo from Drexel. Come back through the backside, win a bunch of matches, and I end up having Matt Smedo in the third place match again. So I get a rematch with the dude that beat me, and ended up beating him in the third place match, which was also really funny because we were like out there, they were doing like all the announcements and everything, and I just remember him standing in the center staring at me, and I went over to the corner with I can't remember who was in my corner. It might have been like Ben and Cubberly. I don't remember who Burley was, but I go into the corner and I like didn't know I was wrestling Tony Ramos over here. um, vividly remember that. um, and then I ended up beating him relatively handily. And then like from that point on, I just kind of rolled through the rest of the season, just beating pretty highly ranked dudes like Mike DePalma, Alex Richardson. So like racking up pretty quality wins, and then come I want to say early February, end up getting a wrestle off. Best two out of three. I ended up beating him in the first two matches, so I earned the spot back, and then just kind of rolled through nationals, rolled through MAC tournament, beat Richardson in the semis, lost to Diploma in the finals, and then went on to NCAA's where I had Clayton Ream from North Dakota State first round, and then BJ Clagon second round, who had upset the 8 seed first round, I think, who was Evan Henderson. And I remember it was late in the match, and I was up by 2 points, or I was up by three. I was up by 3 points. And what I think happened is he gets a reversal. So I think we're tied, or
Mm-hmm.
no, I was up by 2 points. I was up by 2 points. So he gets a reversal. I think we're tied. I get the escape. So I think I'm up by 1 point. And I just kind of like avoid him, and he's like not really coming to attack me, and I was like just confused what was happening. And
Mm-hmm.
come to find out, they gave him an escape and then a takedown. So me getting the escape tied the matchup, and it was tied. And we ended up going into overtime. But before that, I remember the corner was like asking me if I wanted to challenge the call. And I remember being like, I have no idea. Like, fuck it, let's just roll into it because he like I don't know. I had a pretty high pace and knew he was tired. Ended up getting the takedown in overtime, and then going into the quarters, I was Zane Rutherford, which like not the most ideal situation.
Yeah.
He pinned me pretty quickly. I remember he got in on a shot, and like I was pretty scrambly. I tried the leg pass. I remember getting his leg maybe like this far off the mat, and then it just like magneted back to the mat, and I was like, oh fuck. Um, I had never had anything like that happen before trying to hit a leg pass, so I was just like, that's not good. Um, so he ended up pinning me in the quarters, got off the mat, and Zach Horan was the one that was still there with me, and he was like, "Do you want to head back to the hotel?" I was like, "Yeah, I do. I want to get out of here." Um, had had Matt Finesilver in the blood round from Duke. Uh, got rode out the entire second period. Ended up still beating him by a point, which getting rode out in the second period was not pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
But ended up beating him by a point. I remember before like having some semblance of like a thought of a celebration in mind, and when it
Yeah.
happened I remember just like losing all of that plan, and it was just like me just like doing sporadic random shit celebrating. I I get off the mat and I go to like start taking my shoes off and everything, and the coaches were like, "You still have one more tonight." I was like, "What?" Nobody wanted to tell me this beforehand. Like nobody wanted to be like, "Hey, just so you know, after you win this, you're gonna have one more match." Nope, it was just after the match, taking my shoes off. So go lose to Mike DePalma by like a point. I hit an inside trip like as time expired. If there would have been like a second longer, would have scored it and won the match. Lose that one, and then end up having Gio Martinez for the rematch from Reno in
Mm-hmm.
the seventh and eighth place match, and ended up, I want to say, beating him like 5 or 6 to 1 pretty handily. So pretty good year. And then it kind of turned back into the same thing that happened in high school, where like everything went really good right away, and then it just kind of like went back downhill, and not super downhill. I ended up losing the blood round the next 2 years. It was really funny. Pretty shortly after I finished my college career, actually not too shortly after. It was probably like my first second year coaching. My wife was talking with me, and she was like, "Do you ever like think about how your high school and college careers were kind of similar?" I was like,
Thanks.
"No, only all the time. Thanks." um, that one stung a little bit,
Yeah.
but yeah. So next 2 years lost in the blood round. Tried to sit down, have some conversations with Borelli to kind of see if we could go about changing the training a little bit to individualize a little bit more, make sure that like everything's feeling good, and kind of starting to peak later in the year with me being older and everything. Didn't feel like 40 matches was going to be the best thing for my body. And he he was pretty set on doing things the way that he does things.
Yeah.
And was basically like, yeah, no, we're gonna keep doing it the same way. And that was kind of the realization point that I was gonna need a change of scenery. Um, and originally, like my mind was kind of set on going to Penn State. I was like, I'm gonna go there. Mark was there at the time, and like I already had all the connections and everything. I was like, this is where I want to go. Um, end up It's before the transfer portal, so I ended up
Yeah.
getting my release from Central. Uh, and I remember NC State reached out, and I was like, I I will entertain it. I'll see kind of what the situation is. And at some point during all of it, I like sat down and I was like, okay, so I can go to Penn State and like for sure win a team title. Like that's just going to be a given, and
Mm.
kind of be just like a fill plug, and like they're gonna move on. Or I can go to NC State where like I'm gonna have an impact. I'm gonna have a relationship with the coaches. I'm going to like have like a lifelong connection with them. And ended up kind of weighing that a lot into the decision, which made me feel a lot more comfortable going to NC State, where it's like, okay, I'm gonna go somewhere where like they truly value me and care for like me as a person, and want to see me succeed. They recruited me out of high school. They thought I was this good initially,
Right. Right.
and and again, like they're gonna be there for me with life after wrestling, which ended up actually being the entirety of how I got into coaching. So finished finished my career at NC State. Didn't go the way that I wanted it to. It Wrestling gets harder when you get older. In case you didn't know,
Yeah.
your body doesn't quite cooperate with you the way that it does when you're younger. So had had a rib that was out that we thought was back spasms. Treating back spasms for a while. My rib was fucked up. Couldn't quite move the way I wanted to. Still was doing okay with a lot of the matches. But my I actually was sharing this story with a couple of the guys on the team. Um, with them either at the Big Ten tournament losing matches that like kind of knocked them out of the tournament and ended their seasons, or some of the older guys actually where they lost some Big Tens and that was kind of the end of their career. So I sat down with some of them and was sharing the story of my last college match. This one still does haunt me more than the high school one, but it was in the round of 16. I was wrestling Jared Prince, and I was up by, I want to say, 3 points at the time. I'd taken him down 2 or 3 times, and he had 2 or 3 escapes, whatever it was. And I'm on top, I have a leg in, I'm running power half, and I slip off to my back, and he doesn't pin me, but he ends up getting reversal and back points. So going into the third period, I want to say I'm down to 2 points, and I just like couldn't get the points back.
Yeah.
Ended up losing the match, and like that shit hurt because I was hitting a move that I hit all the time and trying to score points and just get reversed in my back to lose a match that I had no business losing. It was just like, and that's the last match. That's the last time I ever competed. So I was able to share that story with them, kind of let them know that like most people, like when wrestling ends for them, like it does not end on the greatest of terms. Typically,
Right.
it goes out in a pretty shitty way unless you're winning an NCAA title, which even some of those guys decide to come back and not end their careers on winning an NCAA title.
Yeah.
So doesn't end well for many. I remember being really bitter towards wrestling for a little while there. Kind of wanted to get away from it. Ended up getting a job it was like data entry, but it was for an accounting place, just kind of inputting data. And I worked there for like a month maybe, and I just remember like losing my fucking mind. I would finish,
Yeah. Yeah.
I would finish my work at like noon that they had given me, and like you didn't have an office, so it was just like a big open area, and they weren't like you couldn't just like scroll the internet when you're done
Yeah.
with your work. It was like if you're done, help other people. I was like, I barely know what I'm doing. Why do you think I can help other people? Um, so I kind of took a little blind leap of faith. At the time, I was trying to go back to Michigan State to see if I could like be a volunteer assistant or help out at any capacity there. And I get a text from Donnie Vinson, who was one of the assistants at NC State at the time, and he texts me. This is also another full circle story moment. He texts me and he says, "I heard you applied for the job at Buffalo." I was like, I had no idea there even was a job at Buffalo. So obviously now him being the head coach at Buffalo, when there was like rumors of him being like in the mix for the head position, I texted him and I was like, "Hey, I heard you applied for the job at Buffalo."
Yes.
But yeah, so he texted me that. I reached out to Stutzman, and he was like, "We actually just filled that position, so we're not hiring anymore. But I'll let you know if anything changes." So then, like a month later, I get a call from him. He's like, "Our other assistant is actually looking at heading over to Edinburgh. You still interested?" I was like, "Yeah." So he brings me out for an interview, which like interviews in wrestling are way different than anything else. It was basically like I showed up, talked with him for a little bit. He gave me some wrestling shoes to work out in, and I wrestled with some of the guys on the team. And he was like, "All right, you're hired." Basically announced that I was being hired to the team that day, and yeah, so that was how I got into coaching. But Shout out to Donnie. Funny, funny that he's now the head coach of Buffalo. All things considered.
Um, yeah, so that's jump started you. So you've been at Buffalo, Michigan State, Northern Colorado. Now you're at Northwestern. I was curious, you've been at all these places. What has been maybe like the constant that you've seen that like if you're wanting to be a successful program or if you are a successful program, here's like a baseline of what you must have. Here's what you've seen in all these programs that you almost need to have to be at least somewhat successful.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty bare bones, honestly. You need a room with some mats, and realistically, somewhat of an education, and then coaches and kids that care and want to be better. Like at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of kids that wrestle because it's what they feel like they should be doing, or it's
Yeah.
what their parents put like expectations on them to wrestle. And then there's kids that wrestle because they truly care about wrestling and they want to get better and they want to figure it out. If you have coaches that care, and coaches that are passionate about it, and you have wrestlers that care and that are passionate about it, like you can be successful anywhere. It's kind of similar to like Rocky. It's like you don't need a whole lot of bells and whistles. Obviously, they're gonna be helpful at a certain capacity, but as long as you have that and you have coaches that are adaptable and willing to make adjustments and make changes and tweak things and continue to evolve as the sport evolves, I think there's a good probability that you're gonna find success at some capacity.
Yeah. So also you've been to a lot of different colleges, um,
Yeah.
and programs. Um, what's one of the campuses that you went on that you were like, holy shit, this is a nice campus, that just kind of like blew you away?
So places that have actually been Northwestern campus is actually like insane how cool it is.
Really?
Just being on Lake Michigan, buildings are all like pretty old Gothic architecture. Everything's very like it's a really cool campus, and you're close to Chicago, so you got everything. It's pretty sick.
Yeah.
Outside of places that I've coached, and more so the places that I've been, um, Cal Poly, I had no idea what to expect going out there, and
Mhm.
you get on their campus, and they're like in a mountain with the ocean visible, and you're like, this is insane. It's like
Yeah.
holy shit. So that campus was crazy. That was
Yeah.
I was definitely a little blown away.
Yeah. Um, Also with some of these places that you've been, you've kind of seemed to elevate a guy that's around your weight. You had Alirez a couple years ago, Chumbley
Yeah,
this year. What's your secret? What's your secret, man, for like, you know?
yeah. So I think the biggest thing for me as a coach, and a lot of it's been just trial and error and learning from like what I would have wanted as an athlete or what I think would have helped me. And
True, yeah.
a lot of it's really just building that relationship with the athletes and like showing them that you care about them as more than just a wrestler, and like investing into them at every possibility, and um, really getting that level of trust where they're bought into you, you're bought into them, and it makes it a lot easier for them to listen to you when you're telling them to do the hard things, and when you're trying to get them to like perfect something, they're gonna listen a lot better, and they're gonna care a little bit more because they don't want to let you down, you don't want to let them down. Where it's like a mutual kind of understanding of like we're gonna fucking do this together. Like
Mhm.
there's no other option. We're gonna figure it out. And yeah, I think a lot of it this past couple years here, especially with Trevor, was building that super solid relationship and pouring everything I could into him. Last year, he was in the Kellogg School of Business, which is pretty tough program, and his schedule was all kind of conflicted with our practice schedule, so I had to do a lot of one-on-one practices with him throughout the year, where there was a lot of moments where we would finish up practice. I would kind of beat him up a little bit in some of the live goes, and I would be like kind of walking with him while he's cooling down, trying to like talk to him about certain things where I can tell he's just like pissed off that he had to go through that, and now he has to go sit on the train to go to Kellogg School of Business and deal with all that. But you could tell he was still listening and like taking the advice, but he was also pretty pissed off and quiet. But, having moments like that definitely helped. But on top of that, just knowing that like he's an awesome person, has super incredible character, and like will do all the little things right. Obviously, sitting behind Deacon for the first couple of years of his career, not going anywhere, waiting until his time and spot came, and uh, coming in, wrestling, and staying, and not achieving his goals last year, not really thinking about leaving. The only thought was whether or not he wanted to come back. Decided to come back, and being able to achieve that this year with him was pretty special. Trevor's my man. He's one of my favorite athletes I've coached, been around, and like it's special. His family's taken us under their wings as well. Like my wife is at everything. She comes to every dual meet. Shout out to Ava. But she'll be one of the people screaming the loudest at the duels. So Trevor's mom ended up really taking her under her wing, and like they hang out a good bit at the tournaments and everything. And now that the season's over, we'll get an occasional call from Trevor's mom and just kind of able to chat with her, and they'll go grab lunch, do whatever. But no, they have an awesome family. So I think all that helps a lot, but it's a lot of building that trust, building the relationship, so they can trust you wholeheartedly, and then also just giving options and like showing them that it doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be one specific way, and like there's a million different ways to do it. It's just a matter of what works for you and how you can figure out how to do it. Like his first two matches in NCAA, he didn't score a takedown, but he won. Like, it doesn't matter how you do it, you just got to do it, man.
Yeah. Yes, pretty much. Like there's a lot of different ways you can win in wrestling, and in other sports too, like in football you can win without scoring a touchdown. Like there's different ways, and that's what's tough about the NCAA tournament is, you have to find different ways to win. Sometimes you have to get a little creative, win in ways you're not used to or comfortable. So,
Yeah, and understanding that it's not always going to be perfect, and there's
exactly
going to be stuff that comes up. But he obviously had a pretty shitty Big Ten tournament. He finished 10th at Big Tens and then 4th at NCAAs, which is crazy to like look at and put in perspective. But I don't know, after Big Tens, kind of, I didn't even remember this, and he brought it up after NCAAs when we were talking one day, and made me feel pretty good. Not gonna lie, when he was like, I was in matches and I like felt myself doing it, and then I thought of what you told me. But we were sitting there, and it was after Big Tens. It was like a Tuesday or Wednesday after we knew he was going to NCAAs. He got his at large, and I looked at him and I was like, "Stop wrestling with the weight of the world on your shoulders, dude. Just go wrestle. Like, don't put pressure on yourself. Don't let anybody else put expectations or pressure. Just go wrestle." And he later told me that it was a recurring thought in his mind during some of the matches in NCAAs, which always adds a certain level of like validation that I feel like I'm doing things right. Which is cool. Feels good. But yeah. At the end of the day, and like I know it's a little bit of a cliche, and there's always a little bit of a joke with it, but it's like at the end of the day, you got to remember wrestling is a game. It's like a game that we get to play. And Cal said it really well, but like it's a pretty serious game, and it's like something that is pretty hard. But stop treating it like it's life or death. Like it is so different than any of that. At the end of the day, and in the rest of the world, most people think winning a state title is better than being an All-American. Or it's like, stop putting so much pressure on yourself. Stop, like, not stop caring, but stop trying to like win matches. Stop trying to win for other people. Stop trying to wrestle to this standard or expectation of like being perfect. Just go out there and have fun, let loose, wrestle, be free, like try shit, see what happens, see what works, see what doesn't, especially in practice where it's like you can get caught in that cycle of just doing the same thing that works over and over again, wrestling people that you know pretty well. So you're like, this is going to work. And you just kind of get in that repetitive cycle where it's like you're better off going and just like ripping shit. The amount of arm spins and just like random shit that I hit now coaching because I don't care anymore. And like the amount that it works is crazy. But like every coach will tell you like they get so much better at wrestling when they're done competing and start coaching. And I think a lot of that resides in the fact of like that lack of pressure, that lack of care, where it's like
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter anymore. And the more you can take that attitude into when you're actually competing and like when it does actually matter, if you can figure out how to have that mindset shift of like this does matter, but also like it really doesn't at the end of the day. Like I know who I am. I know I still have people around me that are gonna love me. I know I have a support system. I know like win, lose, whatever happens, like they're still gonna be there for me. Sun's gonna come up tomorrow. Everything's gonna be okay. Like you can have that level of peace going into a match. Gives you a lot more freedom to just go let it rip and like really just send it and have fun while doing it. Because again, wrestling is hard. It's hard as shit at times,
Mhm.
but it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be fun.
Right. Yeah. Very well said. Very well said. Last thing I wanted to ask you here, um, talk about full circle. We started about a little bit about what you did as an athlete heading into the off season. What about now? Like, what's the off season look like, or what are you planning on doing here in the off season as a coach? Do you take a break from wrestling still, get away? Do you not go into the room? What's the off season look like for you now?
Yeah, so it's a little less of like a full break, but there's that week of staying away from the mat, where you're kind of doing your own thing. Originally, we were gonna go drive out to Tennessee to hang out with my parents, and then we finished NCAA's. And after the emotional roller coaster that we went through, my wife and I were both like, "Yeah, no." The thought of that sounds so so bad right now. So we ended up kind of hanging out back at home, but it's a lot different. The transfer portal obviously opens up like right before NCAA's, so there's a lot of trying to like navigate that and figure out what the needs are, as far as weight classes and everything, and guys that pop up in there that would be realistic to get. So it's not quite a full shut off. And then now I think I'm doing more individuals than I did during season with some of the guys, which I enjoy because again they're a bunch of kids that care and want to get better. So right now, like 4 days a week, I'm doing individuals in the mornings, and then they're practicing in the afternoon. So little less of that break. However, I have also found a lot more like peace in wrestling and a lot more like satisfaction and enjoyment in it. So it's a lot. It's hard for me to be away from it now, where it's like I truly do like I love it. It's something that I've found a passion for, and like I thoroughly enjoy being in the room with these guys and helping them as much as I can, trying to teach them things in different ways, whether it's stuff they've already learned, trying to teach it to them in a different way that's going to help them learn it better, or whether it's just like random shit that I started doing when I was a coach that like I never would have thought of hitting when I was an athlete, and teaching them
Hmm.
that stuff because it's fun. It's fun. Like not just like random rolls and like weird trick moves that aren't necessarily trick moves. Like my baseline high crotch defense has turned into a somersault now. I guess somersault out of high crotch is like it's baseline high C defense for me. But like I've been able to find the fun in it a lot more now.
Hmm.
Again, taking away all the pressures and the expectations and all that has been very helpful. So it looks a lot different. It looks a lot more still involved in wrestling and still being around it. But again, I wouldn't really have it any other way. So
Yeah, and that can kind of seep into your athletes a little bit. If they see their coach kind of trying some things, being a little fun, energetic, that kind of like I said, can seep into your athletes and they can start to feel a little loose, when you have a coach that's always kind of stern and uptight and very down the business. Um, Sometimes it
Hmm.
causes the athletes to be a little tight, a little tense. So that's cool that
Hmm.
you're able to kind of just have fun with it, and then they start to and
Yeah.
it's infectious, I should say.
For sure. The second I see somebody do a somersault out of a high crotch in a match, you're gonna see me in the corner going crazy.
Yes,
I'm
I'll
gonna
look
be
for that.
lit. I'm gonna go nuts. There's a few moves that I have in mind that the second I see somebody hit in a match, because been working some of them. Second it gets hit in the match, you're gonna see me in the corner just going going crazy. But I'm excited.